talk about resistance to change in adults with high functioning autism. We use that term high functioning interchangeably with autism with more intellectual capacity. And really, there's a variety of forms of autism. We're not going to get into them all today. This is the kind I live with. It used to be called Asperger's syndrome. Now it gets termed high functioning, which is pretty non-PC in the autism world. I think clinically it makes a lot of sense. And this is a clinical presentation, so we're going to use it clinically. I would not encourage you to use this term with your clients. We use this term just kind of distinguish because we have to distinguish because autism has so many like presentations, right? There used to be four. We organized them into, so there were four in the DSM-4, there was one in the DSM-5. Now in the DSM-5 TR, there's two. So, I mean, it's kind of this weird, like, we don't actually have a real sense of what is and isn't a current form. Like, so when I say high functioning, what I really mean is think Elon Musk, think Sheldon Cooper, think me, right? Like, diagnosis when so what is it? This was previously known, like I said, as Asperger's syndrome. Can you guys still hear and see me okay, Asel? It just told me my internet connection's unstable.
Yes, it got this like froze a little bit, but you're
Okay.
back.
Let me know if it happens again. Okay. So Asperger's syndrome is what is known clinically as autism spectrum disorder without an accompanying intellectual disability. So as you can see, that probably doesn't fit very well in a program. we use high functioning as sort of, but it's a cluster diagnosis, right? So we have a bunch of different like adjacent similar disorders that as we're gaining more knowledge about the human genome, right? Some of it's genetic, some of it's environmental, and we're learning a ton about it. And so I diagnose autism as part of what I do for a living. And part of that, if you want to diagnose autism, you really have to not only get to know how to diagnose it, you have to know what are rare genetic disorders that look similar, what are PTSD and OCD in their presentations. And so human mind and body is just such a complex place. But the way the APA defines it is a complex developmental condition that involves persistent challenges in social interaction, speech, and nonverbal communication, and restricted repetitive patterns of behavior. The effects of autism and severity of symptoms differ for each person. That was from the DSM-5. Back when they made this, we were still on the DSM-5. So I really like the ADOS. One of the things NIH has done a lot of is pour money into this. And really, I think about just two of these three. I think about social interaction difficulties and restrictive repetitive pattern, stereotype patterns of behavior, interest, and or activity. So I think about this just much simpler. I think, does this person have fixation, a thing they're stuck on, a thing they can't get past that somehow intersects with their social interaction? And do they have social skills that are challenging for them? So social interaction difficulty, right? Like they don't show emotional expression. Like if I have enjoyment, I might instead of I'm happy, I might just be right. So we think about that as a presentation of it. It's so it says doesn't use appropriate facial expressions, right? Like I've had lots of clients who will laugh at really inappropriate times, and that's kind of a facial expression, laughter. Doesn't know how to make others feel comfortable when they're around them. There's this back and forth piece, right? This is why I think a lot about that. Do they have this restrictive repetitive interest that intersects with their ability to socialize, right? So does their interest intersect with their ability to make friends at school? Or does their interest intersect with their inability to say date, right? Or does it intersect with their ability to hold a job? Like it has to have a functional impact. There's a challenge with showing empathy, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'm actually writing another book on that, or at least a chapter on that in a new book I'm writing. They have poor insight. I don't necessarily agree with this part of the ADOS definition, but really, there is a general sense of people with autism lack the social know-how, if you will. I know for me personally, like I lacked this. I mean, I still lack social know-how, right? Like I'm actually 34 now, not 32. And just like some of the things, like even that I lacked in my own marriage when I was married, I think about that as a really great example. Just like she had very different goals than I did, and I didn't even ask those things. Granted, it was my early 20s, so some of this could have just been age, but like thinking to ask ahead of time, like, hey, I want to get a master's in social work. I want to get a PhD. Are you okay with that? Like, never did that and like probably contributed to our divorce. And so there's this poor insight, right? Like, even in the willingness to ask, like, a question, like, is this okay with you? Like, for somebody that I want to spend the rest of my life with, in theory, right? Like, I didn't think to do that. And so I think just points to like, again, I have autism, right? Trouble making social overtures and responding appropriately to the social overtures of others. So like I think about this like this, right? Let's say there's a woman I'm attracted to and she talks to me for the first time. And I've like wanted her to talk to me for weeks and months, and maybe I've said a thing here or there, and she just kind of looks at me like, what are you doing? But like if I respond with, I want to go on a date. Do you want to go on a date? Like the first time she talks to me, that would be like an over response. That would be inappropriately responding to an overture, right? Like she's just saying, hey, I'm interested in getting to know you. And I take that as, hey, you want to date me, right? Like that would be an example of going way too far with the thing and reading it the way I want to read it rather than how she may have intended it. And that's what that really means with social overtures is how do those social contextual things, and they're kind of hard to quantify, but that's the easiest example I can give you. Give and take social communication is, let's say we're having a conversation and we start talking about kids, right? And so I start talking about my kid, or this person asks me about my kids, and then maybe I ask them about theirs. Would be sort of a give and take. If I kept talking just about mine and never asked them about theirs or what's important to them with kids, like, like missing the back and forthness of it.